Welcome back to the Cross Border Interview Podcast, the Ballot Box, a regular segment of the show where we talk about the federal election that is upcoming. We sit down with candidates from across the political spectrum and talk to them about what they're hearing at the door, but also who they are and what they're running on. So today we have Sabrina Grover, the Liberal Party of Canada candidate for Calgary Centre. Sabrina, thank you so much for doing this. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. My first podcast of the election season.
I love to hear that. Sabrina, I start off all my major interviews with any political candidate with the same question. Where does your sense of duty to serve come from?
Great question. I am someone who's been actively involved in advocacy and, activism, I guess, since I was a wee youth. And a lot of my time spent in that, whether it was through things like Model UN, nerdy, I know, but but it's how some of us get bitten by the political bug, or my time with an organization called the Young Diplomats of Canada. And one of the things I've seen through that is that I think sometimes we push a generational divide and say young people are the voice of tomorrow. And I don't think that's true. I think all of us are the voice of today, including young people. And whether you're 15 or 20 or 30, I think you're always kind of considered young, but my duty to serve comes from being that voice of today and being someone who represents the challenges that those in my generation are facing. I'm a millennial, and people who are like me have faced one, two, in some cases, three recessions, depending on where you live. If you live in Calgary, we faced several major disasters that have affected our participation in the economy. We faced generational policy shifts, and those are the kinds of motivating factors that have pushed me into this role. My duty to serve comes from my commitments to Calgary and my commitments to seeing this city be better, and also commitments to making sure that that voice is heard.
I want to learn a little bit more about yourself, Sabrina. And the one question that I usually want to know is, where does the political bug come from? Was your family political? Did they have the normal around the dinner table political conversation, or are you sort of the outlier in your family and decided to jump into politics full force?
So a couple of different places, I think, for me personally. My family's always been involved in politics, especially my dad, and that's kind of where I would say my dad's my mentor in politics and is someone who I've always looked up to. And he was an immigrant, and he moved here from India. And India is the biggest democracy in the world, I'm sure you know, and people are highly engaged in politics there. And he carried that sense with him when he moved to Canada. And I've always admired that. And I think being involved in politics isn't just, I think a lot of people kind of think politics and they think boring. And it's really not about that. It's about understanding policy and understanding how things affect your community, and where different people fit into the policy and political spectrum. So definitely I would say like my family has been a big part of that. And then I was a nerd as a young one. So a lot of my, political instinct and political interest has come from being involved in like debate club since I was in grade 7. And, being able to debate interesting policy at such a young age, all the way through to university, and has made me interested in debating policy full time as an adult. And that I think is a really interesting way that a lot of kids get interested in politics and get interested in policy, because it makes it interesting. It's not just reading out legislation to you. It's actually having a conversation and presenting opposing views, presenting interesting view sets. And so that I think was a big part of my foundation. So to all my debate teachers who probably aren't listening to this interview, you helped me get here. And you know what? There's a lot of debaters currently elected. There's some sneaky debaters in politics today. But yeah, and then kind of just, an interest in making Canada better, and how do we continuously work to make this a great country to live in.
Now, in 2019, the Liberals were reduced to a minority government. We are now in a minority government, so an election can be called at any time. You have decided that you wanted to put your name forward for Calgary Centre in the potential upcoming 44th general election. To start off, why now? Why did you decide that the 44th general election, the upcoming election, was going to be the election that you were going to put your name forward in?
So yeah, as I mentioned, like I've always had an interest in politics, and I've worked in politics for a long time in Calgary, and at a number of different levels, and as well as in Ottawa. And sometimes I think you think to yourself, oh, this isn't my year. Maybe I got to get a little bit more experience. Maybe I should wait a little bit longer. And I spent the last year, like many others, working from home, seeing the challenges that we were facing. And, at some point last year, I kind of thought, you know what, I actually think I do have the experience that I need to be able to represent the voice of constituents. And I think that's really what should be your draw when you think about running for politics. Is it's not necessarily like how many letters come after your name or how many VP positions have you had. That's not what makes you a good representative for your community. It's, are you interested in listening to the people in your community and hearing the issues that they have or the celebrations that they have? And are you interested in then taking those issues or celebrations and moving them forward through a formal process that is government? And, especially as somebody who has been involved in youth advocacy for a long time, no longer a youth, but had been for a long time, I struggle with the idea that lots of young people see activism as the only way to change things. And I think that comes from not seeing people who are like their peers elected in government, whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, and not seeing government as a way to change things. And so I wanted to be able to, prove to young people that government is a way to change things. It's not just a boring, building in Ottawa. It's actually not a boring building. It's a very beautiful building.
Awesome.
But it's awesome. Yeah. But that there's multiple avenues to change things, and activism as a young person is amazing and it's great. And we need that. That's how we've made changes throughout our history, but that being elected isn't impossible. And that that's another avenue for you to be able to change things. And that's how we make permanent change, is through actions by government. It's regulation, it's legislation. And I think people need to be able to see themselves reflected to make that change. And I think that I have the ability to represent that voice.
Now, federally, the majority of people will know that you have to run for a political party or as an independent. You have chosen in this election to run for the governing Liberals under Justin Trudeau. In your own words, please describe to me what the Liberals stand for and who they are as a party.
Yeah, let me take that question and talk about my my values, and I think that that'll kind of like draw into what I think the Liberals are. The way I would describe myself and my values politically is I believe that I'm a moderate. I believe that I'm a centrist. But at the end of the day, I underpin my actions and my vision of Calgary or Canada with a human lens and with an empathetic lens towards people. And I think that's what the Liberal Party is. I think it's a party that represents the moderate interests of Canadians, but that it underpins its values, its actions, and its policies with that human lens that goes beyond just a dollars and cents reckoning of government. I think government is so different than business in that sense that it doesn't just come down to how much money did we make or how much money did we lose, and that financial bottom line. It's kind of the harbinger of social value and thinking beyond just money, and thinking about how things impact people and how we make sure at the end of the day, people who technically are our most valuable resource from a human capital perspective, are at the center of all of our decision making. And I think you see that in things like the feminist international assistance policy, or in the implementation of a gender-based analysis, or in the integration of decolonization and anti-systemic and anti-racism training. That we're taking these ideas, whether it is about growing the economy or adding jobs to Canada's economy, or we're thinking about agriculture or anything like that, and you're taking it from the lens of people. And I think that's what the Liberal Party is, and that's where I see my values represented. And I've been on other sides of the political spectrum, but that at the end of the day means a lot. And I think it means that you approach policy and decision making with a caring lens.
Anyone who is an active user of Instagram or Twitter knows that you have been out canvassing. You've been out knocking on doors and getting people's attention. Are your values that you just mentioned there lining up with the values that you are hearing at the door and what people are looking for in a potential next member of parliament for Calgary Centre?
Absolutely. So I think that one thing that's interesting about COVID and this whole last year is that for a lot of people who kind of ordinarily go about their lives, have really come into tune into like the role that government plays. And there's not really been in recent memory, I don't think there's been a year or a time where government has been more actively out and involved in the lives of people than this year, and reasonably so. We've had a major public health crisis, and I think that alone has shifted people's perspectives on what it means to approach policy with an empathetic and a human lens. And when I go to the doors, I've heard many people consistently talk about things like CERB and the wage subsidy, and how it's either saved their lives or saved their business. Many people who have talked about what that means for our future. And coming for a lot of people who may have accessed CERB, it may have been their first time accessing something like that from the government. But what they've seen through that is the challenges that other people in our society have faced. And as we recover from COVID, how do we actually, it's cheesy to say this because I think it's been overused, but how do we actually build back better? And how do we close those gaps in the systems that were revealed? These aren't new gaps. People have been suffering through these gaps for a long time, whether there's gaps at the provincial or federal level. And I think now people are realizing that there's an opportunity to solve those problems. Some of the major ones I've heard, of course, are seniors care. National long-term care clearly had massive gaps and massive failures. We were failing a significant generation and a percentage of the population that we've just kind of let be, something that I personally am hurt by, and think that we need to fix that problem. We had massive gaps, obviously, that women have faced for a long time in the care economy, with women taking on extraordinary amounts of invisible and care labor that they've been taking on for generations. But now I think a lot of people have learned what that means. Women dropping out of the economy. I think we have the lowest economic participation of women right now since 1980, or in the 80s, sorry. And so, yeah, those sentiments that I've talked about were lived experiences by people in the last year. And I think that's changed a lot of people's perspectives.
Now, in the last 2 weeks as a political observer, you have had two federal ministers come into Calgary, and you've met with them and you've spoken to them. The first being the Environment Minister, John Wilkinson, and then the second being the Transportation Minister, who was just here, if I'm not mistaken, yesterday or the day before. I want to talk about...
here, I think.
Oh, he's still here. Okay, if he wants to come on the show, hey, the invitation's open. I want to talk about transit for a second because as someone who is in the downtown core, the Calgary Centre, where the Green Line is going to be a major construction project for not only the city, but especially downtown, what are you hearing at the doorsteps when it comes to access to reliable public transit at the door?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you asked that because my community, my riding is quite diverse. There's parts that definitely have really good transit access, and there's other parts that are a little bit, well, they're in a train desert, I'd say, maybe not necessarily in a Calgary bus desert. Access to transit, I think, is really, really important for a certain segment of people in this riding, and because it's the way that they get to social activities, to their jobs, and the way that they are connected to the rest of the city. And, for a lot of folks, ensuring that you're not spending 2-3 hours transiting through this city is really, really important. And the Green Line makes that difference in those people's lives. And so, yeah, it's been a huge issue. I think it hasn't been as much of an issue as it would have in the past, because I think now we've really settled the debate, hopefully, on the fact that the Green Line is needed and it's useful and it's something that is completely necessary to move our city forward into the next generation of the economy. And I think it's important that it's being done, and I'm proud of this government for funding that Green Line and making sure that it's committed to. A big part of it is the environmentalism and making sure that we have cleaner and more climate friendly ways of travel. But a big part of it is really connecting people to the places that they need to be and not assuming that everybody can afford a car. It's not just that people maybe don't want a car because they're looking, to be environmentally friendly. It's also because some folks can't afford it. And we need to be able, especially in our downtown core, where we know that the income split is vast, that there's some extraordinarily high income and some extraordinarily low income, and especially through COVID, that we allow people to be able to get to their jobs and to their lives in the best way possible. And I think that's a big part of ensuring that we build transit infrastructure. And any major city in North America, globally even, has good transit infrastructure. It's a key facet of moving your economy forward.
If you were to rank transit as an important issue, where would it be? Would it be the top issue that you're hearing at the doorstep? Would it be like the second? Because I know you did talk about seniors, long-term care and economy, and we're going to be talking about daycare here in a few seconds. But where would it be on the scale of things? Because while I understand, and it's great that you're advocating for it, because people don't have access to cars, and it's hard to buy a car in today's economy, or as our premier would want us all to do, buy a pickup truck. It would be great if we could all buy pickup trucks.
The only way to get around.
Exactly.
Have you ever driven in Calgary without a pickup truck? How would you even get to A to B?
Exactly. So I want to know, in the scale of things that you're hearing at the doorstep, is it the top issue?
No, I wouldn't say it's the top issue. And I think the reason why it's not the top issue is because it's being funded right now. I think if we were back in 2019, when you have a province that continuously is stalling that issue, I think it was a major issue because people were afraid that it wasn't going to be built. And this is a project that has been ongoing for more than 7-8 years in development, and it's a massive part of our move forward. So I think, 2 years ago, it was definitely a top issue, and we know that it was a top issue. I think today the commitments that the governments have made at all levels are critical to it no longer being a substantial issue because Calgarians are confident that it's going to be built.
Now, one of the biggest issues that I think everyone is still facing, and we are unsure if we're in a post-recovery COVID-19 or if we're still in a potential fourth wave here, but COVID-19 has changed the name of the game around how people interact with other people, how people go about their daily lives. This government has tried to help as many people as they possibly can. Earlier this week, if not yesterday, the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper came out and said that this was not the right way to do it. What are you hearing at the doorsteps? And you talked about CERB a little bit, and we talked about wage subsidies, and we'll get into a little bit more about that here in a few seconds. But what are you hearing about at the doorstep? Are people appreciative of what the government has done over the last 18 months to ensure that people aren't falling behind, losing their houses, losing their cars, while also losing their jobs? Because a lot of people became unemployed over the last 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, people are thankful for the support that the government has provided. I would refute the former prime minister's comments on that. I don't think people have felt that way, and I've been at the doors. I've probably talked to thousands of people since this process began, and people are thankful. They understand, first of all, that this wasn't a normal year. This wasn't even a normal emergency. This was a global emergency of unprecedented times, except for war times, perhaps, is the only time I can think of, in our recent lives when the entire world was facing the same crisis. So I think from that perspective, a lot of people understand that perspective. I've had people on all sides of the political spectrum say to me, I completely understand what the government needed to do. And I appreciate that we were able to provide that support to Canadians. You've heard the idea that the government can take on debt that people can't is true. We've just proven it. And the notion that had we not provided that support, I think we already know that Canadians are in a somewhat precarious financial position. Prior to COVID, we're looking at data from 2018, 2019. A lot of Canadians were in precarious positions. Without that support, you're looking at personal bankruptcies. You're looking at personally people sending in the keys, the jingle keys in Alberta, we call them, where you put the keys in the mail and you send them back to the bank for your house. And for Alberta in particular, we've already been through that because we've had a recession from the energy industry. I don't think that Albertans could have survived and Calgarians could have survived another massive economic impact without government support. And I think Albertans know that because that's what I've heard at the doors. People are thankful. I think people recognize that there is a deficit that we now must contend with and that we need to face. And, as we start to get the economy roaring again, I think that that's something that we can face. And one of the reasons why I'm running is that as a 32-year-old, I'm likely going to be one of the people that's massively inheriting this deficit. And I'm happy that we supported Canadians through the pandemic. I think we did a great job at supporting Canadians through the pandemic. And I'm happy now to sit down with like-minded, smart colleagues across this country and figure out how you move the deficit downwards.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, because while we are coming out of the pandemic and people are getting shots in the arms and the number of cases is slowly, while semi being a blip right now, they are going down compared to where they were in January, in March. Mm-hmm. Another political party would say, hey, you can't stop the wage subsidy. You can't stop CERB because of this. You have to continue it on. And the reduction of it is going to hurt the people who rely on it and have come to rely on it. What would you say to the people who say, I would love to support the Liberal Party, but the money that you're going to be potentially cutting from me is going to potentially make me homeless, is going to potentially cause me to go into debt, could potentially cause me to send my keys back to the bank. How do you address that in a recovery process of the pandemic?
Mm-hmm. I think as you approach recovery, it's now about balance. So it's about making sure that those who want to and can work are able to find jobs and are able to get into those jobs in a way that's accessible for them and meets their needs. And I think part of that comes from, for example, the implementation of a $15 national minimum wage requirement. A lot of folks struggle on minimum wage jobs because it doesn't meet their needs. And it's unfortunate that CERB was meeting the needs that employment income wasn't. And so I think as we come back into the economy, restoring that balance and making sure that when folks re-enter the economy, they are able to make the payments and things that they need. And then I think on the other hand, it's about taking the lessons learned and evaluating the social programs that we had implemented throughout COVID, which almost in many ways kind of acted like a national pilot program for social programming, especially on the serve side, and potential new approaches to things like employment insurance and how people are supported when they are unemployed or unable to work, and taking those lessons learned and then inputting them into effective social programs and into the next budget. And I think that this government has proven that it is always there for Canadians. Things alone like the Canadian Child Benefit have lifted just under 500,000 kids out of poverty. And that human lens is the approach that the Liberals have taken to policy making, and putting people first. And I think that that's proven. I think it's going to continue. And I think as we recover, it's just about making sure that we have that balance.
One of the other areas that you talked about was the care economy. The Liberals have been doing a cross-country tour of, hey, we want to roll out our national daycare strategy. $10 a day daycare for every province who signs on. BC has signed on. PEI, I believe, just signed on. Nova Scotia has signed on. There are provinces after provinces who are signing on. The Alberta government says that there are negotiations with the federal government. But are you hearing at the doorstep? I was going to say daycare there for a second, but are you hearing at the doorstep that this is a priority for people who are looking for reliable, affordable daycare?
Absolutely. Reliable, affordable, safe daycare, I think, is what people are looking for. And noting again that it's the province has talked about, flexibility and not having enough flexibility or choice. Right now, the choice that people are making is that if they have a single child, that they are paying the equivalent almost of a mortgage to be able to put that child into daycare. And for some individuals, including single moms, people who are lower income, they don't even have a mortgage. So to ask them to be spending the entire cost a month of childcare to put their child into care, because they also have to then go back and work in the economy, is an impossible choice. And a key part of that choice is that safe, regulated piece, that you don't want to just be leaving your child anywhere. You want to make sure that where you're leaving your child is the right place and it's safe, and that child will be cared for. And so, I think it's a huge thing I've heard at the doors every day. I talk to young families at the doors and I hear about how much it costs to keep their child in care. And I think that was revealed obviously through COVID because, parents were at home. But the costs are staggering. And I've had a lot of folks who, maybe don't have children or who didn't have childcare issues when they were young parents, ask me how it's going to be paid for. And what I would say to that is it will pay for itself when you allow 50% of the working population to easily and accessibly access the labor markets without fear that their children are not in a safe, regulated place at home. When a woman doesn't have to worry about paying $2,000 a month for her child to be safe, and doesn't have to worry about cutting her job short and only working part-time or only taking a consulting contract because she has to be there at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day to take care of her child, she's going to contribute to the economy. And that money that people are saving from childcare is going to go back into the economy and stimulate the economy in other ways. Parents can take vacations. Parents can enroll their children in day camps. They can do other things with their money that are going to stimulate the economy. This is not a social issue. This is not a women's issue. This is an economic issue. And I don't have children, and I firmly believe that this changes the landscape for women in the economy and in the workplace, because at a certain age, employers look at you and they say, oh, but she might have children and she might have to take maternity leave and she might have to always leave at 4 p.m. exactly to pick up her child from daycare. And it limits your options in promotions and in jobs. And I think that for all women and all people, parents or not, this is a game changer for the economy. And the data is there. There's not even, this isn't an argument. Countries who have safe, regulated early childcare and learning are doing very well in the economy. And the data is there to prove it. So.
While we've just talked about what the sort of the left is attacking the Liberal Party on, I want to talk about what the right is attacking the Liberal Party on, and that is the Liberal
Attacks from all sides.
Exactly. I want to talk about the energy industry. The energy industry seems to be a issue that the Conservatives like to attack the Liberals on because they are perceived to be soft on the energy industry. They don't want more oil. They want to cancel pipelines. Are you hearing from at the doorstep that while you are a great candidate, we can't support you because your party is anti-oil and they want to destroy the economy for Alberta? And what do you say to people who say that to you?
So, first let me say that this party isn't anti-oil. And it's certainly, for the record, again, it's been said a lot, but we bought a pipeline and it's currently being built. For those, anyone who's asking, bought the pipeline, currently being built. What I would say is, I've been in politics a long time in Alberta, and the conversations I'm having with people today at the doors are radically different than the conversations I may have had in 2012, 2015, 2019. I think that the mindset and the vision of Calgarians has changed, and the mindset of Albertans has changed. And it's been, in many ways, led and guided by the energy industry itself. I think that the energy industry in this province is, in many ways, further ahead than where even government needs to be and is. And we've seen the commitments to net zero by energy companies, at net zero by 2050. We've seen that, especially in Alberta, energy companies are presently the biggest investors in renewable and clean tech in the province, not only in their own companies, but additionally supporting that complementary rise of entrepreneurship and startups that are working in the clean tech and renewable space. And so companies are leading the way. And government is setting ambitions. The federal government is setting the ambitions for a clean environment and climate change at a national level, and setting those ambitions at a global level. But it's about making sure, and I think the Prime Minister said this a few weeks ago, it's about making sure that we prepare Calgary to be a place for jobs of the future. And jobs of the future could be in the resource industry, but those jobs look different than they do today. And I think that's the edge that we're moving towards, that the Liberal Party is moving towards, and that the Conservatives continue to hold us back on. To the Conservatives, the ideal is the same as it looked in 2012, as it looked in 1996, as it looked in 1980, and we've evolved from that time. So I don't know why we wouldn't evolve going forward on a new approach to energy and to the resource industry. Energy doesn't just mean one thing anymore in Alberta. It means a number of different kinds of things. And, as I mentioned, how do we create that complementary industry to energy that's going to support it? We need technology in transportation and logistics. We need to continue innovation in clean tech and renewables. We need to potentially be a place that accepts jobs that are in manufacturing. If we're going to have net zero vehicles, doesn't mean that they have to be manufactured in Ontario. They could be manufactured in Alberta. That's the future here. And I think that's the energy industry that this government is supporting. And it's responding to a global changing demand. Minister, as you said, Minister Wilkinson was here last week or 2 weeks ago, and he's now leading on the global G7 file with our G7 partners on climate financing and adaptations, a big part of which is new energy. And, you look at the UK government, that's a Conservative government that is leading and is the president of the COP for this year. So it's not something that we can say is not being reflected globally, or is that it's a liberal agenda. You have Conservative governments around the world that are attacking climate and energy in a new way, and Canada is part of that leadership.
again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here again, because while it's great that we're looking after the environment, people of the Green Party will come at you and say you can't say that you're environmentally friendly when you buy and build a pipeline. How do you address that? How do you say, you know what, we are trying to hit those climate targets that we've set, but we have to build this pipeline because we understand that the oil industry is not dead, it's not going anywhere, and we need to get our crude oil to market?
Yeah, I would say that it's a balanced approach to jobs, the economy, and the environment. And I think that I'm proud of Alberta and Canada's energy industry. I think it's on the cutting edge of innovation globally. For the last 2 decades, we have been on the cutting edge of innovation. You know, organizations like CASIA have led on environmentally friendly, sustainable ways to produce energy in this province. And I think it's about balance, and it's about recognizing that the industry is on board to transition, that we need to be able to support them, and that we support them by having good ambition and by stimulating the economy and stimulating the renewable industry to be able to make those changes. I think just because you buy a pipeline doesn't mean you're not an environmentalist, because we understand where energy comes from, how people are moving forward today, but we also understand that ambitions need to be set. And I think that is a balance that the Liberal government has struck with its policies. And I just wanted to circle back to something that you said earlier about the conversations I've had at the doors. And the conversations I've had at the doors are exactly this conversation. I am not, I am very much less so hearing angry voices and voices that are frustrated, and a lot of voices that are in fact really interested in the way that we move forward and are completely on board with how Calgary and Alberta moves forward on an energy transition, on this new energy. And a transition doesn't mean that we're turning off the taps tomorrow. It means that we think about a future economy that reflects and complements our resources, but also moves us forward in many other ways. And people are on board with that. Calgarians are on board with that. We're having better conversations today than we have in our past.
I just looked at the time and I realized that I because I love policy talk so much, I've let this segment run a little bit longer than I should. But I do want to say, for those who are tuning in right now, we are sitting down with Sabrina Grover, the Liberal candidate for Calgary Centre. I want to move into you being the next MP for Calgary Centre. If you are elected, you are going to be elected in a time that, politically speaking, we are more divided than we have ever been. There seems to be a growing gap between where we were 10 years ago compared to where we are today. How do you envision governing for not only the people who vote for you in the next election, but for all the people of Calgary Centre?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, I think that really comes down to also the reasons why I'm running, and my motivation for running is I am running for the Liberal Party because I believe that their values align with my values. And this is a vision I'd like to see for Canada. But my motivation for running is for Calgary and for Calgary Centre. And I feel really connected to this community. I feel connected to the people that I could possibly represent. And the interests that I have are really about making changes for this community at a community level. And I think the federal government has a role to play in that, whether we fund things like affordable housing, whether we fund things like local infrastructure. You're talking about nature pathways and community associations that are able to do things in their own backyards, whether we fund things like arts and culture, which is rich and growing in Calgary and dominated in Calgary Centre. I'm running for Calgary and running for Calgary Centre, and nationally I'll be part of the Liberal Party, but my ambitions and my hopes are to make improvements in this riding specifically. And I think a lot of that deals with the economy, and I think that's the approach that I'm taking, and that's why I think I can be representative of voices that maybe didn't even vote for me, because I'm not running on a political stance. I'm running to make improvements to our city that I think are necessary and that the federal government should and will and can support with the right person at the table. We need a Calgary and Alberta voice at the decision-making table. I think someone said that this is the first time in like 40 or 50 years that we haven't had a cabinet minister from this province in any government at the table. And I think that that's a loss for us. It holds us back. But yeah, I'm running in it. I'm running to be in it for Calgary. And I think that that transcends that hyper-partisan political view. The benefits that I think that I'll make are to the people here directly.
Now, it is in 2015, Calgary Centre went Liberal under the former MP Kent Hare. You, in 2019, Greg McLean did take it back for the Conservatives, and the Liberals haven't had a good, I shouldn't say chance, but a good reputation of winning in Calgary. What gives you hope? What gives you the push to continue canvassing, to continue door knocking, that's telling you, hey, I'm sensing a change here. I'm sensing that people are looking for that voice, are looking for that change, and the current MP is not giving us the voice that he promised us in 2019?
I think a lot of my hope is being driven by the response I'm hearing at the doors. And, what I've been saying to Calgarians at the doors and on the phones is that we need to tell a more positive and ambitious story about who we are and where we're going. And Calgarians are resonating with that. The perception that we put out, that we are negative and that we're angry and that we hate Ontario and that Ontario hates us, is not the reality that's on the ground. That's a narrative that is pushed and it is portrayed by many of those who represent us and seek to be the only voice for Calgarians and Albertans in Ottawa at the provincial and federal level here in this province. And I talk to Calgarians every day, and that is not the response I'm getting. I'm not saying there aren't folks that don't feel like that, and I don't want to invalidate their feelings, but I wouldn't say it's the overwhelming response. And there was a conversation a couple of weeks ago on, I think held by City X Lab, on the perception versus reality of Calgary. And we had the same conversation with, I think, 300 people around the virtual Zoom table, that perception doesn't match the reality. That Calgary is a vibrant, dynamic, thriving place. We have a thriving art scene that's not just a nice to have, but it's part of our economy and continues to grow to be part of our economy. We have amazing communities that people clamor across this country to live in because we have a good standard of living, because they're accessible, because they are walkable, and they're built as, complete communities. We have an economy that is rising in its diversity and is diverse, just isn't necessarily fully supported to be all it can be. And that is the reality of this city. And so that negative, angry portrayal of a mad Albertan isn't correct. And I don't think people want to feel that way, and they don't want to be painted that way anymore. And I think that's the the thing that I've had that keeps me running, and continuing to hear about that has been really positive. And the last thing I'd say is there are a number of Calgarians who are liberal, and there are a number of Calgarians and Albertans who are on the progressive side of the political spectrum. And I think they're tired of being treated like they are anti-Albertan, or that by somehow voting liberal that they don't care about this province. And that is the message that we're taking to people, that you don't have to feel like that anymore, and that we're here to represent that view.
In order to represent that view, you have to be first elected. Take a few moments.
Indeed.
Take 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. Talk to the people of Calgary Centre. Talk to the people who are potentially thinking, you know what? You're right. I'm not the angry Albertan that people are portraying, and I want to put my faith and trust into Sabrina as the next MP for Calgary Centre. What do you say to them? Take 2-3 minutes. Go ahead.
I think it's exactly what I've said already, that I think in Calgary, it's time we tell a more positive and ambitious story about who we are and where we're going and what that future looks like 15, 20 years down the line. It looks like, people are not moving here just for jobs anymore. They're moving here for a lifestyle. And we have a great place to live in the city, but we need to make sure that we continue to invest in that, to continue having it be a great place to live, making sure that we have a welcoming environment for people, making sure that we invest in the things that people care about, healthcare, childcare, transportation, infrastructure, the things that the federal government is more than willing to invest in, especially where other governments may pull back their investments in this province. And how do we make sure that the story we tell is positive? At the end of the day, I think that Canada needs more Calgary at the table. I think Canada needs Calgary to be one of the economic engines of this country, and it is already, but it has the potential to be even more than the story we currently tell. And I think, frankly, Calgary needs more Canada. We're not just standing out here on our own. We're part of this amazing country, a great, social fabric that weaves through our whole country. And we are a major city. We're a major metropolitan area. We have the potential to continue to be that, but only with the right investment and only with the right story. And I think that's a story of the future and not a story of the past. So, and I think that that's what the Liberals are here for. And personally, as I mentioned, I'm in it for Calgary Centre. I'm in it to represent this community and be the Calgary that Canada needs.
Now, yet again, I'm just cautious of time here. We're about the 50-minute mark, so I'm going to do a quick little wrap up. But my last question to you is, how can people learn more? It's great that we can have this 50-minute conversation. We can have this interview. We can have this conversation. But people will probably want to learn more about yourself, get involved, reach out to you. How do they do that?
Great question. So we have an online presence, like most people these days. And so you can find us online, sabrinagrover.ca. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, because I'm one of those millennials, at Sabrina Grover. And just learning how to use TikTok. This is a new foray for me. It's very exciting, very interesting, a new media for us. But yeah, sabrinagrover.ca. Follow me online at Sabrina Grover. And if you're out there and you're listening today, we're going to be having a picnic in Calgary Centre at Stanley Park, 5 p.m. Come on down. Sandwiches and snacks for everyone until we run out, I guess.
There you go. For my listeners and to my viewers, the link to Sabrina's website, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook are in the show notes, so check it out. I will be honest, I am not linking anyone's TikTok in the show notes because I do not understand it and it's not for me, but check it out. Go get informed. This is an important election that we're talking about. This is the future of Canada that we're talking about, and you need to get out, get involved, learn about the candidates, and I hope that this last 50 minutes has done just that. Sabrina, thank you so much for doing this. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat with you. And what the other way you'll find me, Calgarians, is I'll probably be at your door or calling you on the phone. So look out for that too.
Yet again, the links to Sabrina's information is in the show notes. Our information is in the show notes. Hit the subscribe button because we are back next week with another Liberal candidate and this weekend with the People's Party of Canada candidate. So be sure to follow us because you don't want to miss these important discussions. With that, thank you so much and see you tomorrow morning. And you'll see me tomorrow. Sabrina is going to be canvassing probably, but you'll see me tomorrow back for another episode of this.
I was like, will I see you tomorrow? I don't think so.
No, but you'll see me.